My name is Ava, and for 17 years I believed I was building a family. I gave, I sacrificed, and I trusted until the day I found out the truth. They weren't just ungrateful, they were plotting against me. They stole from me, betrayed me, and laughed as they thought they had won. But they made one mistake. They underestimated me, and this time I wasn't going to let it slide. When I first met Ryan, I thought I had found the perfect man. He was charming, kind, and everything I had ever wanted in a husband. For the first few years, things were good, until his mother, Margaret, began showing up unannounced. At first, I thought she was just overly involved, but I was wrong. One evening, while I was cooking dinner, the door swung open, and there she was, her eyes scanning the living room like a detective inspecting a crime scene. "Ava, are you seriously just sitting around watching TV at this hour?" She scoffed, shaking her head in disapproval. "Ryan is out there working his butt off, and you're here. Relaxing?" I had just paused for a moment after a full day of cleaning, grocery shopping, and my part-time job, but none of that mattered to her. "I was in the middle of making dinner," I said, forcing a polite smile. She didn't even hear me. She marched straight to the kitchen, lifting the lid off the pot. "This is it? Curry and salad? That's all my son gets after a long day? What did your mother even teach you?" The jab at my upbringing stung more than I wanted to admit. I clenched my fists, but I stayed calm. "Did you need something?" I asked, hoping to get to the point. Margaret's eyes widened in mock offense. "Oh my, just because I pointed out dinner, you get all upset? And where's my tea? Shouldn't a daughter-in-law know how to show respect?" Respect, that was her favorite word. I made her tea, but of course she found something to complain about. "Cheap tea. You don't even try, do you?" Back then, I thought if I stayed patient, she would eventually accept me. But I was wrong. My silence only encouraged her. She began coming over more frequently, picking apart everything I did. "The floor is still dusty. Do you even clean? This furniture looks cheap. You should decorate better. Poor Ryan, having to put up with you." Each comment chipped away at me, but the worst part? Ryan never defended me. "She's just trying to help, Ava," he said dismissively when I finally gathered the courage to bring it up. "She wants you to be a better wife." "I'm doing my best, Ryan, but she shows up unannounced, criticizes everything I do, and it's exhausting." He sighed as if I were the problem. "If it bothers you, tell her yourself. But don't forget, she's family. She cares about us." Cares about us? His definition of care was twisted, because the more Margaret visited, the worse things got. One evening, she brought a bag of vegetables that were nearly rotten and insisted I use them for dinner. When I did, she wrinkled her nose at the plate. "Serving wilted vegetables to my son? What a disgrace." That's when I realized this wasn't just about controlling me. She wanted to break me. I was exhausted, drained, and completely alone. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. I kept telling myself that things would get better. That maybe, one day, Margaret would ease up. That Ryan would finally stand up for me. But deep down, I knew the truth. Nothing was going to change. And then, one day, she took something from me that I could never forgive. It started like any other evening. Margaret had, of course, invited herself over again. She sat comfortably on my couch, sipping the tea she always complained about, while I set the table for dinner. Ryan walked in, tired from work, and as always, they immediately launched into their favorite routine, complaining about me. "Ava, you could have made something better than this. Poor Ryan, working all day, and this is what he comes home to?" Margaret sighed dramatically. Ryan, instead of saying anything in my defense, just shook his head. "She never listens, Mom." I clenched my teeth, biting back the words I wanted to say. But then I saw it. Hanging delicately around Margaret's neck, shimmering under the dining room lights, my mother's necklace. My heart stopped. It wasn't just any necklace. It was the last thing my mother had given me before she passed away. I had kept it in my drawer, locked away, safe. Or so I had thought. That necklace. My voice came out shaky. Margaret glanced at me, her lips curling into a smirk. Oh dear, how disgraceful. Wanting something that belongs to someone else. I felt my stomach drop. "That's mine," I said, my voice firmer this time. She let out a mocking laugh. "You must be mistaken." "Ryan, did you hear that? Your wife is accusing me of stealing. How shameful." I turned to Ryan, expecting, hoping, for once in his life he would take my side. But he just scoffed. "Maybe you lost it. You're always so careless." That was it. That was the moment everything inside me snapped. Without thinking, I reached forward, trying to grab the necklace. Margaret gasped loudly, dramatically, as if I had just attacked her. "Ryan, do you see how she treats me? She's been bullying me for years when you're not around," she wailed. Before I could even process what was happening, Ryan shoved me hard. I stumbled back, hitting the wall, pain shooting through my shoulder. But the pain wasn't just physical. It was the sharp realization that this wasn't just emotional neglect anymore. Ryan had chosen his mother over me. He didn't ask for an explanation. He didn't care about my feelings. He just stood there, his arm around his mother, while I stood frozen in disbelief. "I don't want to hear your excuses," he snapped. "Mom, let's go out for dinner. Ava needs to think about what she's done." And with that, they walked out, laughing, as if nothing had happened. I stood there for what felt like forever, staring at the door, my chest tight, my breath shallow. And then, something inside me shifted. For years, I had let them push me down, insult me, belittle me. But this was unforgivable. I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and whispered to myself, "They think they've won, but they have no idea what's coming." Before I continue this story, I want to take a moment to connect with you, my amazing viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop the flag of your country in the comments below. I know some of you might be watching this alone, but I want you to remember you're not alone. No matter where you are at this moment, I'm here, sharing this story with you. And trust me, it's only going to get better from here. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything that had led me to this moment. The years of insults, the stolen necklace, the way Ryan had shoved me aside like I was nothing. Every wound they had inflicted on me burned in my memory, but instead of breaking me, it did something else. It hardened me. I wasn't going to be their victim anymore. The next morning, Ryan and Margaret acted as if nothing had happened. They sat at the breakfast table, chatting and laughing while I moved through the kitchen in silence. My mind was elsewhere. I had a plan to set in motion. Then, as if the universe was handing me the perfect opportunity, Ryan came home one evening with a smug grin and an armful of papers. He tossed them onto the table in front of me. "We bought a new house," he announced, his voice dripping with self-satisfaction. "We'll all be living together, you, me, and Mom." I stared at him, trying to process his words. "What? Isn't it exciting?" Margaret beamed. "It'll be so much easier now that we'll be under one roof. No more complaining about my visits." I could feel my hands trembling, but I forced myself to stay calm. "How did you pay for it?" Ryan scoffed. "Don't be stupid, Ava. We used your savings, of course." The room seemed to tilt. "You used my money?" "It's not just your money. We're married, so it belongs to both of us," he said, as if that justified everything. "And honestly, you should be grateful. We already signed the contract. It's done." Margaret smirked, folding her arms. "Ava, dear, don't look so shocked. You always say you want to be a good wife. Well, good wives support their families." I felt my heartbeat pounding in my ears, but I didn't let them see my rage. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, tilting my head slightly. "By the way," I said, keeping my voice eerily calm, "did you check whose name is on that bank account?" Their smiles faltered. Ryan frowned. "What do you mean?" I couldn't help but laugh. It was a cold, bitter laugh that sent a shiver through the room. I watched as Ryan grabbed the papers, flipping through them in confusion. His eyes widened. Then his face turned pale. Margaret snatched the papers from his hands, her expression twisting into one of horror. This isn't your name," she stammered. "No, it's not," I said smoothly. "I never told you it was mine." Ryan looked at me, his face ashen. "Whose is it?" I smiled. "Your father's." Silence. The color drained completely from Ryan's face. He opened his mouth, then closed it, struggling to find words. Margaret looked like she had seen a ghost. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Did you really think you could break into my drawer, steal the bank book, and get away with it?" I asked, watching them squirm. "You didn't even think to check the name?" Ryan shook his head, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "You're lying." "Am I?" I raised an eyebrow. "Why don't we call your father and ask?" The room was dead silent. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, the realization of what they had done sinking in. Ryan's father, George, was a sharp man. He had long suspected that his wife and son were reckless with money, and he had given me control of that account to make sure they didn't do anything irresponsible. And now they had stolen from him. And I had proof. I had known something like this might happen, so I had installed a small camera inside my dresser drawer. The footage showed everything: Ryan and Margaret breaking the lock, taking the bank book, and celebrating as they thought they had outsmarted me. I had them exactly where I wanted them. Ryan finally found his voice. We can fix this. We'll explain." "Oh, you'll explain, all right," I interrupted. "To your father and to the bank, and maybe even to a judge." Margaret's face twisted in rage. You ungrateful little. Careful, Margaret, I cut her off, my voice dangerously calm. Because the next words out of your mouth might be the last ones I ever listened to. For the first time in years, she was speechless. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, panicked. Ava, let's be reasonable. We're family. You wouldn't actually. Oh, I absolutely would, I said, standing up. Because you just made the biggest mistake of your life. And with that, I walked out of the room, leaving them drowning in their own fear. They thought they had won, but the truth? I was just getting started. The next morning, I made a phone call. George answered on the second ring. Ava? Everything okay? I took a slow breath, steadying my voice. I think you need to come over. It's about your bank account. Silence, then a shift in his tone. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When George walked through the front door, Ryan and Margaret were already in the living room, their faces tight with nervous energy. They had been whispering all morning, trying to come up with excuses, ways to manipulate their way out of this. But the moment George entered, the air shifted. He was a man who commanded authority without raising his voice. He looked at me, then at them, his sharp eyes scanning the tension in the room. What's this about? He asked, his voice steady. I didn't need to say a word. I simply picked up the remote and pressed play. The TV screen flickered to life. There, in crystal clear footage, was Ryan and Margaret breaking into my drawer, pulling out the bank book, flipping through it, laughing. George's face darkened. Margaret shot up from the couch. This is ridiculous. Ava's twisting everything. This is, Ryan jumped in. Dad, listen, it was a misunderstanding. Sit down. The authority in George's voice sent shivers through the room. Ryan and Margaret froze. Slowly, they sank back onto the couch. George turned to me. How much did they take? I met his gaze. $300,000. A slow breath escaped him. He turned back to them, his expression unreadable. I trusted you, he said, his voice quiet but sharp. I gave you everything. And you repaid me by stealing? Margaret's lip trembled. We thought it was Ava's. Oh, so that makes it better? George's voice snapped through the room like a whip. You stole because you thought it was hers? Are you hearing yourselves right now? Ryan clenched his fists. Dad, we're family. Why are you taking her side? George's eyes narrowed. Taking her side? You think this is about sides? This is about the fact that you broke into a locked drawer and stole money you had no right to touch. Ryan shot to his feet. I work hard. I deserve that money. George exhaled sharply, shaking his head. Deserve? You deserve nothing. You haven't earned a damn thing in your life. Margaret tried again. George, honey, we can fix this. We can. You are not my problem anymore, George cut her off. His voice was calm, almost too calm. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of documents. You two are going to repay every cent, with interest. Margaret paled. What? But we don't? You will, George said simply, and you'll do it the hard way. I've canceled every financial support I've ever given you. Your credit cards? Canceled. Your name on my properties? Removed. Your cushy little allowances? Gone. You're on your own now. Ryan's face turned ghostly white. Dad, you can't do this. I just did. I watched them crumble, their perfect little world collapsing in front of them, but I wasn't done yet. I picked up another set of documents from the table and slid them toward Ryan. He barely looked at them before realization dawned. Divorce papers. No, he whispered. You can't. I crossed my arms. You stole from me. You let your mother torment me for years, and when I tried to stand up for myself, you shoved me into a wall. You made your choice, Ryan. Now I'm making mine. He turned to George, his voice desperate. Dad, don't let her do this. She's breaking up our family, George scoffed. Ryan, you did that all by yourself. Ryan's face twisted in fury. I won't sign it. I gave him a slow, measured smile. Then we'll go to court, and I'll make sure everyone, your father, your boss, your friends, knows exactly what kind of man you are. Oh, and by the way, I reached for my phone, tapping the screen a few times before holding it up. Remember that footage of you? Breaking into my drawer? I have copies, plural. His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, he looked truly terrified. You wouldn't, he breathed. I tilted my head. Try me. Silence. Then, slowly, his hand reached for the pen. His fingers trembled as he signed his name on the papers, sealing his fate. I took them, flipped through to make sure everything was in order, then looked at him one last time. You should have treated me better, I said simply. And with that, I walked away. Margaret called after me, but her voice was nothing more than a distant noise. I stepped outside, breathing in the fresh air. For the first time in years, I felt light. The weight I had been carrying, the years of mistreatment, the endless struggle, it was gone. Ryan and Margaret had spent years trying to tear me down, believing I would never fight back. But in the end, they were the ones who lost everything. And me? I had won. This story is about self-worth and taking back control. Ava spent years enduring mistreatment, believing love and patience would change things. But in the end, she realized true strength is knowing when to walk away. What do you think? Comment 2 if you loved her journey, 7 if you think she should have handled it differently. And if you enjoyed this story, like and subscribe for more powerful stories. Remember, no matter what you're going through, you are stronger than you think, and you are never alone.